Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of The Monsters Den. It's Thursday night. We're here to talk horror movies, fantasy movies, sci-fi movies. You know how it goes. Here on The Monsters Den, today is what we've been watching episode. We like to do these every so often, usually at least once every month and a half. It's usually, this is a good palate cleanser where we don't have to actually go and watch stuff for an assignment that we have. So this is just the stuff we've been watching in our spare time or picking up or whatever. But let me introduce the crew first. We got Mr. Craig Kaminski with that awesome House of Pain shirt, courtesy of Dan. Speaking of Dan, Dan Brown is here. All the way from Scotland, Mr. Davy Gallagher is here. Jamie Lazlo is here. And of course, the king himself, Chris Allo, is here. What's up, guys?
What's going on?
Good evening.
All right, so this is always fun to see what stuff we've been watching that doesn't pertain to a topic we're doing here on the show. So, Chris, why don't you kickstart us off with a couple? We'll do two times around the crew.
Okay.
What do you got?
All right. Perfect. First one that I watched, I had just watched it over the weekend. It was actually streaming, so I don't have the cover. But it was a movie that just came out, I believe, on Arrow home video. I'd always wanted to see this because I heard it was terrible. And the rumors were true. This movie's fucking awful. But it was worse than I thought. Anyway, the movie's from 1977, directed by Ed Wood. It's called The Meat Cleaver Massacre. And I had always wanted to see it because I had read the story of how Christopher Lee shot footage for a horror movie, and that horror movie was never released. So the producers of another horror movie bought that footage and inserted it into this movie and released it and called it The Meat Cleaver Massacre. And what I found when the Meat Cleaver Massacre, it was streaming on Shudder, I kept me and my buddy Sean watched it together, and in fact we watched the trailer first, which has the Christopher Lee footage in the trailer. But when Christopher Lee is not in it, and I was like, what the fuck? Because I remember reading how Christopher Lee was like asked in an interview, like, oh, you're in the Meat Cleaver Massacre, and he was like, what? Long story short, apparently there's two versions of this movie, one with the Christopher Lee footage and one without. And unfortunately, the version that's streaming on Shudder is sans Christopher Lee, even though he's in the trailer. Long story short, it's a terrible movie. It's about a bunch of college kids who look like they're in their 40s who want to get even with their college professor who teaches a class on the occult. So the one guy's like, yeah, let's go get him. And so they break in his house thinking they're going to beat him up, but they actually kill his family. They kill his wife and his two kids, but just beat the shit out of the professor, who then goes into a coma. And because he was teaching the occult, is able to psychically somehow attack the guys that beat him up, his students. And I'm like, well, this movie's just a fucking ripoff of Patrick. But then I'm like, wait a second. This actually came out before Patrick. So the movie is terrible, but it, for that and for the curiosity of Christopher Lee, and now I really want to see the Christopher Lee version, even though I thought this movie sucked. I want to torture myself more. That's my first pick, Meat Cleaver Massacre. What else did I watch? Heavy Metal Parking Lot. On Blu-ray, courtesy of Vinegar Syndrome. This is, I don't know if anybody knows this one. This is a famous quote-unquote cult movie. That was two kids got some cameras, went to a Judas Priest concert in Baltimore, Maryland in 1986, and just filmed all the kids tailgating. And it ran on public access TV down in Maryland once. Thankfully, somebody videotaped it, and it went out into the tape trading circles, of course, which I was a part of. and I've watched this thing many times. It is fucking hysterical. I mean, talk about like truly capturing a moment in time of just teenagers in the 80s, you know, shirtless in a parking lot, you know, with broken glass everywhere, and everybody's got their Camaros, and everybody's skinny, and you know, like half the audience is either in a Judas Priest or an Ozzy shirt and drinking and doing drugs, and it's a lot of fun. Now the interesting thing, yeah, this is a Blu-ray, but the heavy metal parking lot's only 27 minutes. But this thing is loaded. There's like 4 hours of extras, way more than you would need. Like there's all these other documentaries that these guys made, similar documentaries. You know, there's Harry Potter parking lot, and there's like Julio Iglesias parking lot. It's nuts. But it's worth it because it's a lot of fun. How many should I do, Pete? Because I got like 7 or 8. Should I do 1 or 2 more?
Yeah, do one more. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. This came out a couple years ago, and I saw the trailer, and I was like, that looks not that great. But I was on a website recently, and I picked up this Blu-ray for $5.95, including shipping, and I was shocked. I really enjoyed it. Night of the Animated Dead.
Okay.
It is basically a retelling of Night of the Living Dead in an animated format. The animation is a little basic, but it's got an unbelievable voice cast, like all Hollywood A-listers, and it's fun. I mean, it's really gory, with, you know, far gorier than the original. Of course, it's in color, and there's a few extra bits. Like the best part is, you know, in the original, where Ben is talking to what's her name about Beekman's Diner, and how he, you know, ran up and you know, there were zombies and he ran out of gas and whatever. Now, instead of him telling Barbara, I guess it is, you see it for the first time. And it's pretty cool. I mean, it was absolutely worth $5.95. More than that, I don't know, but it was definitely worth the $6.
I've never even heard of it. Wow.
Yeah, it came out, I think, 20. I can't see shit with my glasses. 3 years ago
or something like that.
Yeah, 2018, 2019. And I remember seeing the trailer being like, meh. And I forgot all about it, but
is that
somebody had it for cheap.
In the city? It doesn't play. There's an animated one where it takes place in the city. That's not that one. This one takes place.
No.
Okay.
This one is just like the original. You know, okay. It takes place in the farmhouse in the country in Pennsylvania in the 60s.
Oh.
So it's basically just a remake of the original, but animated and with you know, an A-list Hollywood voice cast.
Interesting.
But if you see it for cheap, worth picking up.
Cool. Davey.
Thank you. Well, I was in a bit of a rush to get things there because I thought we were doing a completely different show until a few minutes ago, unrelated to the beanie. So we'll can that for a week. So I just what's turned up recently that I've watched. Big one, I guess, would be the Bruce Lee 4K box set from Arrow, which is just a delight. I have watched about a quarter of the special features, even though I have tried to watch quite a lot. There are just so many on it. I mean, that whole bottom part there is just the special features. Whole of that from Arrow. And when you consider this is 3 movies, it's not as if he did 20, he did 3 movies. So you get documentaries on Bruceploitation, you get documentaries on the films themselves, you get documentaries about the documentaries. It's a bit meta, but because the documentaries themselves were Bruceploitation, you know, one of them famously used a lot of his own funeral, as did his posthumous release of Game of Death 2. A lot of this is way into the woods, but most importantly, the films themselves just look stunning, absolutely breathtaking, and sound brilliant. And you get the Mandarin cut for the first time of The Big Boss, which is legendary. It's got all sorts of new footage. It's not been on anything before, not even bootlegs. So this is just essential stuff. I know Criterion did the Bruce Lee box set a few years ago. It doesn't have a quarter of what this does. It really doesn't. This is the definitive presentation of Bruce Lee's career. Only downside is Enter the Dragon, as we've kind of been discussing in our group chat, is owned by Warner's, so they wouldn't sub-license the new 4K to this set, so it's just the Blu-ray that you get here. Warner's are doing their own 4K next month, so that's a bit of a downer, but hey, you can just pay that up separately. And they're not producing any new extras anyway, so if you're happy with the Blu-ray quality of Enter the Dragon, then it's exactly the same disc you'll get here. It's just not going to be 4K. This version itself is sold out. You can get the standard edition, which is a red cover with a kind of painted picture of Bruce, but this is obviously one modded on his outfit, so it's a really lovely set.
How many copies did they make of that?
They haven't said, but that one has sold out. But Arrow has Jamie can attest, the customer service is not what it used to be. When it comes to fulfilling stock and things. The Empire of Scream set, for example, people were paying $200 for that just to find out that it was only out of stock, not out of print. The customer service is just so bad these days. What would go with that? Being a completist sometimes isn't fun, as we know from Curse the Collector, for example. And that leads me to be a completist with Jackie Chan. And boy, that can be an experience in the 21st century when you get some of his movies. Some of his best work is in the 21st century from an acting point of view. But I must admit, the acting in Ride On, starring Jackie and the donkey, it's not the best. It's actually quite a fun little movie, though. He's a washed-up stunt guy. And this is his horse, who he used to use in all the films as stunt horse. And they're the double act of the movie. And it's almost a kind of piss take on the way that Jackie would be used in American movies, where they would put him with a comedian for no... They never got Jackie Chan, like Miramax, and they never got Jackie Chan. They would always put him with Chris Tucker and Owen Wilson and all these... Why? Just let Jackie be Jackie. So here, he proves that he put him with a donkey, he can still be funny. It's an effortless return to form. I'm not too sure about that. He only did Police Story 2015 in 2015, so his form's not been that bad. It's not the best, but one for the collection. From a relatively new label, Criterion, they have literally released two things, so I guess that makes them pretty new. They've just released a big deluxe edition of Jeff Lieberman's Satan's Little Helper, which is
kind of fun.
Yeah, it's one of those, and that's all you'll ever say about it when somebody asks you. It does everything you want it to do, but it doesn't do anything above and beyond that. It's one of those perfectly serviceable films that you'll watch, you'll be satisfied for an hour and a half, and then you'll never think about it again. But rather kindly, they bundled it with Remote Control, Jeff Lieberman's previous movie, which was one of the first movies of Jennifer Tilly, and Kevin Dillon, 25th anniversary edition. And this was aliens using videotapes to control the populace in a kind of They Live storyline. Pretty good stuff. So the throw-in extra was actually more fun for me than the main thing itself. And then I guess I'll round off with, I did get Christopher Lee in my movie, Chris. The Bloody Judge.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't love The Bloody Judge. I don't love Christopher Lee's work with Jess Franco, to be honest. I think he loved working with Jess Franco, and Christopher Lee was a real harsh critic of his own work, but for some reason he loved working with Jess Franco, even though some of the films were absolute bullshit. The latter Fu Manchu movies and things. But they did do Count Dracula, which I think is a genuinely great movie. Just Count Dracula rather than Dracula. That's a fantastic film. The Bloody Judge isn't, but it's kind of halfway towards, it's based on the famous hanging Judge Jeffries, halfway towards Witchfinder General. It is pretty explicit, it's pretty violent, but it's pretty cheap at the same time. That's its only fault. It's got that really low budget, but not sleazy enough to really justify its existence. It's as if they're trying to still push the Christopher Lee gives us class thing, so we can't be too explicit. Whereas you think if he wasn't in it, it might be going for more of a Caligula vibe, where they're just playing it as a total exploitation movie, posing as something a bit classier. But yeah, it's a solid movie, and again, far too many extras for a film like The Bloody Judge, for goodness sake, just absolutely teeming. And this is from 88 Films.
Cool.
There we go.
Jamie.
Me? Oh,
Jamie?
so Jamie or Dan?
Jamie.
Okay.
Work my way.
I'm gonna keep it real, guys. I have been buying a lot of movies. And back when I was younger, I'd get off work, rent 3 movies, watch them all that night, return them all the next morning. And I'm kind of in that mindset there. I bat out 3 movies. I'm not batting out movies like I used to. When I get off work at 4, if I can get 1 movie in before bedtime, I did okay. So I'm buying more than I can watch. And it's getting a little bit ridiculous. I'm buying shit just to set it on the shelf and have it represented sometimes. Shawshank, I love that movie. Buy it. I don't know when I'm going to watch it, but it's represented on the shelf, and I need to stop doing that. So I've been buying a lot less.
That look on Chris's face is like, yep, I know.
I've been doing that, Jamie, for 35 years. So.
I know. I need to slow down and just catch up with some shit that I bought, especially box sets, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I finally started getting to some of these things that I've had for 6 months to a year. Well, I'll get to some of that. But I got this maybe, I don't know, 5 months ago, Thrillers from the Vault.
Oh, yeah.
8 films.
Yeah, that's good.
They could have called it, they could have just had 4 films on, well, maybe 5 films, and call it the Mad Doctor series with Boris Karloff. And that, I think, would have been cooler in a way. You wouldn't have gotten the other movies, but I think it would have been cooler because it had that theme. But all 4 movies are on here. The Man They Could Not Hang, Before I Hang, The Man with 9 Lives, and The Devil Commands. All great. They could have threw on The Boogeyman Will Get You because it's kind of a parody of those 4 movies, and that would have been fine too. And I never saw The Boogeyman Will Get You, and I started it a few weeks ago. I thought it was just a horror movie, and it started with that. It sounded like an Abbott and Costello fanfare, and right away I'm like, oh, it's that kind of movie. Goofy as hell. Return of the Vampires on here. I don't think you need that on here. It's cool that it's there, I guess. The Black Room with Boris Karloff, man, what a performance with the double twins. And there's a movie called 5 on here. It's a decade later from 1951. It's very drab. Karloff or Lugosi's not in it. It's not that great. That is just, it doesn't need to be there. So yeah, I finally got through all of that. And when it comes to box sets, I bought this almost a year ago, the Twilight Zone box set. And I said, I'll fly through these. And then, this isn't really horror, but around the same time, I got the Rockford Files box set. I said, I'm going to fly through all of this. I have been watching these regularly, okay, for a year. I'm still on fucking season 1 of Twilight Zone. There are 36 episodes in season 1, 29 in 2, 37 in 3, 18 in 4, but then 36 in 5. And I mean, this is going to last me another 3 years. And Jim Rockford, I watch this regularly too. My wife hears the theme constantly upstairs. And I'm halfway through season 2. So when it comes to big box sets, I need to put the fucking brakes on and just get through this shit. When it all comes to other physical media, I added a couple things since we last talked to my Saturday morning lineup. I have Saturday morning cartoons on one shelf, and I like to sit here on Saturday mornings, and the Saturday mornings I'm not hungover, and watch Saturday morning cartoons. And I added the original Batman, Adventures of Batman. This was before Super Friends. What's strange is I don't remember this. I mean, it looks like Super Friends without the rest of the Super Friends, and you got the same voices, Casey Kasem doing Robin. I just don't remember it, but it's got that old school look about it. And I got a bootleg of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends on DVD because I can't find it on Blu-ray anywhere. And that's really fun.
Yeah.
Well, one cool new thing I got is the Creep Show on 4K. I have not watched it yet, but my question is with this, they give you 2 slipcovers. What are you supposed to do with the second slipcover when this one's on that one? What do you do with this one? You
Just
put it
ask
on
Pete, he would say
and it
throw
kinda
it in the
sticks out
garbage.
further.
Sell it on eBay.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
especially
keep
the
it, but
alternate one.
I was thinking of putting it over my DVD, but it's not bent. It's still kind of not creased yet, so I'm keeping it. It's the collector in you, you want to. I don't know. So yeah, and my second round, I'll talk about shit that I've been streaming.
Okay, cool. Dan.
Oh, here you go. Well, for starters, I'm not gonna talk about this. I did buy the Bruce Lee box set.
Oh, you got it too. All right.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. It's funny. I saw the dialogue that Jamie had at one. I think it was you ordered it and it was back ordered or wherever it was. I saw some dialogue on the message board.
Oh, not the Bruce Lee.
That was
Oh,
Emperor Streams, Jamie was.
Oh, okay. I thought the Bruce Lee, because I went right on the Arrow after, I saw went on and got it during that same thing. So I thought you were having problems with the Bruce Lee one. Anyhow, having had a chance to watch it, that's going to be like, a month off to see that, but it's got a bunch of stuff on there. I mean, I think it's like at least 6 hours of just Game of Death information. I mean, back footage, workout, you name it, it's on there. They pulled everything out. It's not going to get any better than this. And I had bought the Criterion. But anyhow, get back to what I've been watching. I've been traveling around the universe. Not many new things, but I started by visiting a film I thought about a few days ago. I don't know why, but it's called Red Planet.
Oh yeah, Gaddis Eyes.
And I said to myself, because it was a big misfire. It was a horrible film. It was, made during like Val Kilmer's period when he was just so much fun to work with, I guess. And I'm saying, how did this film fail so bad? It got Tom Sizemore at his peak in films, Carrie Ann Morse just off of Matrix, Benjamin Bratt before he, became even more famous, and the fellow Australian actor who played a show called The Guardian, I think, and he was also in Land of the Dead, Simon. Australian actor. And we got all these people and Terrence Stamp is in it.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm watching this thing, and it's about this group of people. They're going to Mars. They crash. They're trying to land. The space shuttle's outside. The usual shtick. The thing is circling. They only have so much fuel. They're on the land. They find they can breathe. Well, they have a robot along. It's like a dog, and this dog, robot, like gets short circuited and starts hunting down, but it gets a level of excitement. It just never gets exciting, and it just ends kind of like in that movie Spear they did with Dustin Hoffman, where they all held hands, said "Kumbaya," and the monster disappeared. Just strangest thing. Anyhow, too bad mishap. Apparently, Val Kilmer and Tom Sizemore almost went to blow a few times, and the director said, "Do me a favor. If you're gonna punch Val, hit him in the stomach so he don't ruin his close-ups."
Didn't that come out at the same time as Mission
Mars.
Mars from Brian De Palma? And they both like canceled each other out.
And I figured, how bad can this be? That's a great cast. And it's just like, wow, what a shame. Anyhow, gonna go. Some years ago, I watched a film and have it in my collection called "What the Waters Left Behind." It's a Spanish horror film that takes place, I believe it's in Argentina. Back in the 1960s, a dam broke and it literally flooded this town in reality. And about 30 years later, the water started to recede. So what you've got is this ghost town. I think this town is called like Quater or something like that. It was a mining village, a very wealthy resort area, but it's all decayed. It looks like a lunar landscape of abandoned buildings. Well, you take that, put the elements of the Hills Have Eyes, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, with people broken down there, and it's pretty intense. And the family's off the rocker. Great little film if you get a chance. Well, they just recently released a sequel called Scars: What the Water Left Behind. A big letdown. It picks up shortly after the first film, and it just doesn't pick up. But if anything, check this out.
What's the full name, Dan? What's it called again?
What the Waters Left Behind.
Huh.
And it's I think it's Argentina or Brazil. It's South America, but it's pretty intense. It's got kind of like that, let's say Texas Chainsaw, inbred crazy shit going on. So worth a watch. Okay, another thing. Now we're going to go into the bootleg world. This is some stuff that has only been out on VHS. And I decided to revisit these because I was starting to watch some noir. And I says, I remembered a film in the early 90s that was a supernatural noir film series. And there were two films that came out. First one is Cast a Deadly Spell, which stars Fred Ward, David Warner, I think it's a Penelope Ann Miller in this one. Takes place in 1948. If you take the world of the movie Bright that came out on Amazon Prime, I believe, with Will Smith, about they're living in modern Los Angeles and there's orcs and there's fairies and stuff. Well, this goes even further. This Los Angeles in 1948, right after the war. The problem is that it's supernatural and witchcraft. And even the detective's name is Phil Lovecraft. And that's played by Fred Ward in the first film. Great little film, very good period piece. Boom. Followed 3 years later by a sequel called Witch Hunt, in which Dennis Hopper is now cast as Phil Lovecraft. It takes place during the Red Scare era in the 50s. And Eric Bogosian is the bad guy. It's about possession. They're just fun little movies. They came out on VHS some years ago and I think they never went to DVD at all. I don't know why they're held up. But you can find them on streaming networks here and there, and particularly Tubi or even on YouTube for that matter. But they're worth a fun look, and they could have launched a whole series taking place in the 40s and the 50s. Just a fun watch. Now, let's see. The last thing I will say here right now is going to be I went out and bought this box set. It's called Danza Macabre.
Oh yeah, I've got that one.
On
Yeah.
Severin. Let me tell you, I've only gotten through two of them. I've had many of these films in a illicit format, but I'll tell you, I sat down and watched Lady Frankenstein with Joseph Cotton, which was always a grindhouse drive-in special. It was one of the earliest titles of European horror that was chopped up and put on VHS in like the public domain bin, and you'd find it all over the place. Let me tell you, they do that's the first one I've seen is Lady Frankenstein. They did an incredible job restoring this film, considering the only thing I ever seen was late night prints and scratchy 16 millimeters. Full blown Joseph Cotton, who, like, in my opinion, went from working from Orson Welles. But let me tell you something. When he made horror films in the 60s, he made some really good ones. He was involved in some good material in horror. He didn't end up going as bad as John Carradine, but he was in Baron Blood. And he also worked right up to the end, like Heaven's Gate with Michael Cimino. But the other three films, there's a film called The Seventh Grave, which has really not had much distribution in the U.S. It's an Italian black and white horror film, but they're all gothic. You can find this on internet for under like $50. I can blow it out of here video. I think I put a list up one day. I think I blow it $54, and if you get so much, they take so much off. So it's a worthwhile guess. You're talking less than $15 a movie. So if you're into this stuff, go for it.
That's a great deal, because I got that Lady Frankenstein. They released it in, I think it was England, like 2 years ago, and it's the same transfer. I think it's got most of the same extras, and it looks amazing.
Beautiful.
I paid, I think, $50 just for Lady Frankenstein. So if you can get that whole set for $50, that is a steal.
That's a steal. I mean, so that's why I like finding.
It's a great time because Severin, Vinegar Syndrome, Arrow, and Indicator are all doing gothic European sets at the moment, with no sign of stopping. So it's a great time to be into that kind of scene.
Yeah, for sure.
I was losing faith in Arrow a little bit when they made the band, when they were purchased by whoever it is. I'll tell you, the Bruce Lee box set really redeemed them and put them. These are certainly like boutique wars, and that's why I think you'll get like the Bloody Judge, and they'll have like 7 hours worth of extras on there, or something. They're just trying to compete and give more and more, which is not bad, but it also ups the price for the films, of course, as well when you buy them.
As Chris says, I don't mind if we get quality and we get stuff that it's stuff that we really want. Is when you get the same stuff gets released over and over. That's what pisses you off.
Like I said, they get passed around like a stripper at a bachelor party with these labels. They just get thrown from place to place to place. Next thing you know, it's Umbrella, and from Umbrella's putting out these huge box sets, and here, and then next thing it comes to Criterion, and Criterion's the one that started it. Then it went to Arrow. Arrow goes to this, and and you're getting, it's kind of difficult. It's kind of silly, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, amazingly, next year is the 40th anniversary of Criterion. 40
Wow,
years.
that's
It didn't-
crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
I had a VHS Criterion. They were putting out VHS in huge boxes back in the Tower Record days. And it's so funny, not to change something, but Secret Agent by Hitchcock and Young and Innocent, the films, they were restored in the 80s and put out in this fabulous state of VHS tape and Laserdisc, and they've never re-released them again. You've never seen those restored versions ever again unless you happen to find it online somewhere.
Young and Innocent's out from Network on Blu-ray.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Crazy.
All right. Okay. Sorry. There you go.
A lot of good stuff here. Craig, what do you got?
All right, I'm going to keep it real. I haven't bought shit, but here's
That T-shirt you didn't say bye, baby.
but I missed two episodes prior because I was out hanging out with the mighty Rich Catino and seeing Winger live, who were much heavier than on album. But you guys reviewed the latest Evil Dead movie, so I too watched that. I don't want to devote too much time to that since you guys did a splendid job without me, and I did enjoy it. I thought it was pretty gory, and I did like the end where it was like the merging creature that was at the end that went in the wood chipper and everything. So I did like that. I also watched the 2013 Evil Dead. I had not seen that before. It was okay. I mean, I didn't think it was great. I mean, it was all right. There were worse ways to spend an hour and a half. And then, don't tell anybody, and don't make fun of me, guys, but I never saw the original Evil Dead, and I watched that for the first time, not that long ago, just a few weeks ago, and I did enjoy it. I liked that a lot, and having never seen it, I didn't realize while I was watching it, I saw all the similarity. I was like, wow, this same stuff happened in part two. I didn't realize that it's like, oh, the woman's in the cellar, and I was like, well, wait a second, I thought that happened in part two. I didn't realize that it was kind of a remake reboot. Part two was of the original, but
can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go.
Now watching Evil Dead the original for the first time around the same time as watching the new one, be honest, which one do you like better? Now that you don't have the tie to the old one, like in your DNA or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I did like I guess it's because I like the original more, maybe because of Bruce Campbell and being it, and I did like the effects and how they did it. And knowing what I know now, that it was made, on a shoestring budget, that I did like it, but I really didn't have much of a problem with with Evil Dead Rises. So, but anyhow, I didn't want to spend too much time on that since, like I said, you guys did wonderful. A couple of weeks ago, I went to Blobfest in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. So I got to see the 1958 Steve McQueen classic, The Blob, on the big screen. Very fun night. And it was cool seeing such a nice, bright, colorful movie. And of course, there's a little bit of nostalgia with it because you're in the actual theater that the Blob wreaks havoc in towards the end of the movie. So it was fun to see that, and everyone was cheering along with it. There were a lot of people talking to the screen, things that don't happen, like when Chris, Pete, and I have been to the Horror-thon, where people are pretty quiet and respectful. This time they not as much so, but it was really fun to see it. I've seen the movie before, but certainly not in a theater setting. The night before is where the theater stages the run out, where you and it's within control, so there's no trampling and of people, but they have a where you run out onto the streets screaming about the Blob. But I didn't get to go see. I didn't participate in that. But the movie
Take
was
their
fun.
Blob seriously there in Phoenixville. Let me tell you.
Yeah, they really do. They had a Blob dance. They had a Blob contests, and yeah, it's all kind of fun stuff for the weekend. So check it out if you're able to, if you're local to the area. And it was fun to see. I watched a pretty shitty movie on Tubi. I don't know. Thinking back, I don't know why I picked this. It's from 1983 called The Demons of Ludlow. It's about a haunted piano that it's a town, an old town is sort of celebrating its 100th anniversary or so, and so this piano is brought in and to play like the town song or something, and it raises these spirits. It wasn't good. It was cheap and bad. I have no idea why I picked it, looking back on it, but it was there. I don't even know. I don't even recall if there was nudity or anything, but it was just cheap and corny and not a whole lot of fun. I wish it would have been a lot better than what it was. I watched an Italian movie that is playing actually in a few weeks locally in Phoenixville, because I wasn't sure if I was going to get a chance to see it on the big screen, so I figured, what the heck, I'll take a look. It's called Nothing Underneath from 1985. Donald Pleasance is probably the most well-known person in it. A giallo movie. The basic plot is a Wyoming park ranger who works in Yellowstone has a twin sister who is a fashion model in Milan, and they have a sort of psychic bond, and he has a vision that she's been murdered, and so he travels overseas to Milan to try and find his sister, who is indeed missing, and along with some other models that are being killed along the way by an unknown killer. It wasn't too bad. It had a few plot twists and everything, and you don't know who the killer is until towards the end of the movie. So it was decent enough, but worth a watch. That was streaming on Tubi. The last two were ones that I tried. I think I watched most or all of them, and they just weren't very good. These were movies I had DVR'd. One was called Unearth from 2020. Adrienne Barbeau was in that. It was about fracking, a farm that they decide to sell parts of their land to the gas company to do some fracking, and of course they unearth some monsters. The only problem is it took well over an hour to unearth anything, so it was very slow. A lot of it reminded me of that Matt Damon movie Promised Land, but it just had monsters, and because since they both had fracking in it. The other one I tried to watch and I gave up after about 20 minutes or a half hour was Studio 666 with Dave Grohl. I DVR'd it from Stars or Showtime, and I just didn't. I don't know. I couldn't get into it. I thought it was kind of stupid. Kerry King was in it, and I saw his name in the credits, and so I was like, oh, cool. And yeah, spoiler alert, he dies within like 15-20 minutes. But he actually does have some good on-screen charisma. So if he ever wanted to go into another career, I think he could. The other members of the Foo Fighters are in it, and even there's a quick cameo with Lionel Richie in it. Don't ask, but it wasn't all that great. It was kind of like they were trying to record an album in like a haunted house, kind of like how Judas Priest recorded British Steel in John Lennon's house or whatever, but it was haunted because there had been murders that had taken place there, and Dave Grohl is seeing ghosts. But I personally just couldn't really get into it. I gave it about a half hour and just gave up on it. So
a lot of press, that movie that they were talking about.
They tried to be funny. It didn't make you laugh. They tried to be scary. Really. It didn't work. And
didn't it come out just before Taylor died? Wasn't it like the same week?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was in it. He is in the movie and has lines. Pat Smear does too. I mean, it's the band of when the movie was made, and then Carrie King plays one of their roadies
Yeah.
in the movie, and there are some other I can't think of her. Jenna, the girl from uh, Pearl, or excuse me, X, the young
Jenna
girl
Ortega?
that was, she's in it in the beginning. So there were some people that you recognize. Jeff Garland was in it also. So there are some recognizable people. I just personally just really couldn't get into it. Maybe
No, it's a
some
lot like
people
Foo
out there
Fighters music, bland.
yeah, they didn't really play a whole lot of their music, at least for what I was watching. But it just wasn't my thing. But other people may enjoy it.
Seems 20 years too late, doesn't it, for that to, Foo Fighters to be able to
Right.
cross over into that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
All right. Just rattle off a couple quick real. I just got this real recently. This is the most recent thing I watched. I had never even heard of this film before, from 1972. It's an hour-long exploitation made in Australia called Night of Fear.
Oh yeah.
And this
Oh, yeah.
is see, Chris, I do save the slipcases.
Well, now you do.
How you do?
I
That's
have
from
been
a
for a while.
Now that we yell at you.
Yeah, two of you guys were getting on my case for years. No, I do save them now. So this is a double. It's got Night of Fear and Into the Damned. Both were done by Terry Bork. So Night of Fear is a really interesting movie, as it predates the Texas Chainsaw Massacre by just a couple of years. And there's some like themes and things going on in this film that are like, you would swear Tobe Hooper must have been watching this film before he did Chainsaw Massacre. So it's like an hour long. There's almost no dialogue in the whole movie, and it takes place like there's this creepy dude who that doesn't talk, and he just makes noises the whole time. He lives out on like a little farm, if it's even a farm, out in the woods in Australia. And what he does is he stalks women, brings them back to his place, and in his place there's like all sorts of bones and feathers and all sorts of animals in cages and rats all over the place, and he terrorizes and tortures these women. And in most cases, he seems like he's a complete idiot, but he knows how to kill, and everybody thinks he's just a stupid like mute guy or whatever, but he's actually pretty diabolical when it comes to capturing and torturing women. And he sicks the rats on them, he chases them around with he's got like the axe and whatnot. So the whole scene with Leatherface chasing around what's her face all throughout Chainsaw Massacre, there's a scene in here where he's chasing the blonde chick, the main actress, here through the woods. Very, very similar. Very cool film. Like I said, I think it's like 57 minutes long. Very creepy, very disturbing. The fact that it's got no dialogue makes it even creepier. And the killer just throughout the whole film. That's really all you hear from him. And she screams throughout the whole thing. So very cool, very creepy. If you can check it out, it's called Night of Fear from 1972. Into the Damned, which is the other film on here, is kind of like this weird Western horror film mashup. That kind of bored the crap out of me, but Night of Fear is pretty cool. It's only an hour long, so very cool. Check that out. This just came out on 4K, but I bought the Blu-ray like right before they announced the 4K. Infinity Pool, fairly recent movie. This is twisted shit.
Yes.
This is
Great.
twisted movie with Alexander Skarsgård and Mia Goth, who's incredible in this film. Cleopatra Coleman and a bunch of other people. Just, I mean, without giving too much of the plot away, imagine going to like a reclusive like island resort somewhere on the other side of the earth, and you kind of get caught up with the wrong people on this island. Then you find out that the government of the island is doing some weird experiments, and everything goes not according to plan, and all of a sudden your life as you know it is completely turned around. That's basically this film. There's plenty of sex in it. There's plenty of gore in it. Mia Goth is terrific in it. It's just really twisted. I had no idea what this movie was about when I went into it. I think Davey recommended it, and I saw a bunch of other reviews of it that were really good. And I like Skarsgård a lot, and I like Mia Goth, and this did not disappoint at all. Really, really wacky film. Very, very cool. Got the 4K of Hell of the Living Dead. So if you want to watch a cool Italian Bruno Mattei film, zombies and infections and on New Guinea, whatever, it's kind of like an island native type of film, and the lead chick is really interesting to watch because she's kind of naked in half the movie running around, and this is pretty cool. Really good low budget Italian zombie movie. It's not all that original. It's very derivative of a lot of other zombie films that came before, but still loads and loads of fun. And my last for this go round, one more zombie film. Had to get this on 4K. I originally told Chris I wasn't going to, but then I realized I only had this film on DVD, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to get it. I got the Dawn of the Dead reimagining, remake, whatever, from God, what year was this again? 2004.
2004.
Yeah, Zack Snyder. This is fun. It doesn't hold a candle to the original, but I think it's different enough. It's got good production qualities, really good cast, and it's pretty violent, a lot of fun. So, and 4K
Best thing he's ever done.
Yeah. And the 4K looks amazing. This film looks really, really good. You've never seen it look this good. So, yeah, that's my first batch. Back to Chris.
Cannot believe that that's coming up on 20 years that was in theaters.
Scary, right? Yeah.
That's crazy.
It seems like yesterday I went to see that in the theaters. I mean,
Yeah.
it seemed like
I went with like 8 friends. Holy shit. 20 years.
That's nearly been as long as the original was to that. In a few years.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Good point. Wow.
Yeah, for sure. It's a pretty good film, though. I think it holds up pretty well. For years, I was kind of like, because I'm such a fan of the original, I was kind of like, did we really ever need that? But when you watch it on its own merits, it's actually very well done.
Sarah Pauli's great. Sarah Pauli's great in it.
Oh yeah.
I think you nailed it, Pete. It's original. It's original enough.
Yeah.
I mean, really, other than them, they're both taking
Just
place
the
in
idea.
a shopping mall. That's it. Everything's completely different.
Yeah,
it's like an action movie.
It's a re-envisioning. It's not like a remake. It's a re-envisioning.
Yeah.
Like when you watch The Shining, it's Kubrick's interpretation of The Shining. If you look at it that way, it's easier to swallow. But I like Dawn of the Dead because it really does. The moments in the sewer where they're dragging the guy through and the zombies are just falling down and going after it. It's like pretty some nail biting shit going on there. I'll tell you.
Yeah, it's good.
Or they released the first 5 minutes online, also, if you recall. The first 8 minutes of the film they had released, they leaked it out, legitimately. Where the little girl comes to the house and the big car chase and this and that, and then it left you there. So that was also that'll get you.
That's right. Yeah, it's a great opening scene. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. Cool. All right, Chris, what do you got?
All right. I'll go through these quick. Before we went live, we were talking a little bit about Shudder and Screenbox, and I was saying my favorite thing about Shudder is the subscription streaming service. Is there's tons of movies on there that I want to buy, but then I can watch them on Shudder without having to buy them. And of all the movies I've seen on there, the only movie that I was ever enjoyed enough to buy the disc, I talked about this probably like a year ago, was this movie, The Shed. And I picked this up for, I think, $6 on some website, so I couldn't pass it up. I talked about The Pit a couple episodes ago. The Shed is basically The Pit on a $5 budget, but with less boobs. It's not as good as The Pit, but it's the same premise in that a teenage kid gets a vampire stuck, like a ravenous, creepy vampire stuck in his shed, and oops, a couple people happen to get fed to the vampire in the shed. It's short, it's cheap, but it's fun. I liked it. It's worth checking out. This movie, I actually bought the 35mm film print a couple years ago. Never ran it, but I do have a thing for aquatic monster movies, and this Blu-ray just came out. I had to have it. This is the Taiwanese film Crocodile, and it's pretty good. I mean, listen, it's not as good as Alligator or the Great Alligator River or some of those other ones, but it's not bad. It's basically just a crocodile goes around chomping up people. I wish there was more crocodile footage. There's a bunch of cool extras. The thing that sucks is they show a bunch of deleted scenes that are like really shitty quality from like the Taiwanese version of like the fucking more of the crocodile chomping people. I'm like, what the fuck? But the disc is the US version, of course, cleaned up and remastered. Looks great, but I'm like, well, shit, I wish you had the whole version on the Taiwanese one on here, but still worth checking out. Crocodile. This is one of my all-time favorite horror movies. Just came out on 4K. Looks absolutely fantastic. I couldn't tell you how many times I have purchased it, but it's Lucio Fulci's City of the Living Dead, aka the U.S. title was The Gates of Hell, starring the great Catriona McCall, and yeah, it's Fulci and zombies in New England, and if you haven't seen it, you're probably watching the wrong channel. And last but not least, one of my favorite movies. This is the one movie, my one tradition. I watch this every summer. I think this is the fourth time I've purchased it, and I just love it. And it is Great White, aka the Last Jaws, the Last Shark, from Enzo Castellari. This is the new German Blu-ray. It is in German with German subtitles, so there is no English, but I don't care. To have this awesomely bad shark movie in HD is amazing. It's never looked better. There's a whole bunch of extras. Of course, they're all in German too. The menu's in German. So if you don't speak German, buyer beware, but I didn't care. I love it. And of course, now that this came out in Germany, that means it'll probably come out in the States.
4K from Severin next week, yeah.
Yeah, probably. Although the legality stuff I hear is still an issue with this movie. For those that don't know, this is a complete ripoff of Jaws and Jaws 2. Film Ventures International released this in movie theaters in America in, I believe, 1981. Universal Pictures got an injunction against it because it was such a blatant ripoff, and a judge ordered marshals to go to each theater and retrieve the 35 millimeter film prints, and they were the property of Universal Studios, and this movie has never been released in America since in any format, and it is amazing. If you like Jaws, this is the kids today would say this is the dollar store version of Jaws, but it's amazing, and that's my list.
I remember, I guess it was 2 years ago, Chris. It was in the summer, and you talked about that on one episode, and Rich Gattino and I, neither one of us had seen it. So we both said, all right, we're going to watch that film this weekend. And he and I were both watching it in our separate homes at the same time on a Saturday afternoon. And he and I were texting each other throughout the whole movie. It's like, did you fucking see that scene? We were all dying. How fun. I mean, this is such a blatant ripoff, but there's so many like WTF moments that are hilarious.
Hilarious. It's
Yeah.
gory. It's funny. I mean, it's got a great cast. It's a blast, and it's a shame that it was pulled from theaters because, man, I mean, for years, thankfully with the internet, you can get anything now. But I remember as a kid, I read about it in Famous Monsters, and then it never came out, and it took me, God, I read about it in '81. I don't think I got a bootleg VHS until like 1995. I mean, it was like 14 years I wanted to see this movie. But it is worth checking out. Craig always asks the question, like, well, how is it that you could watch it on Tubi and YouTube? How is it legal there? Yeah, they stole most of the shark footage from this, and that was put out in the movie Cruel Jaws, which was released on Blu-ray, but then was recently pulled. So I don't know the legalities, but I do know that Quentin Tarantino tried to show a 35 millimeter film print of this at his movie theater, the New Beverly Cinema. God, this is probably 15 years ago. And Quentin Tarantino's people reached out to Steven Spielberg's people to be like, hey, is it okay if we show this movie this one night? Because I have Enzo Castellari here. And Spielberg was like, yeah, of course. And then they put the tickets on sale, and Universal Studios stepped in and was like, no, you cannot show this. So I'm always like, holy shit, if Tarantino and Spielberg can't get this movie fucking shown, this thing has been under wraps for way too long. So
that's a grudge.
Yeah, that's holding a grudge.
That's crazy. All right, Davey.
Imagine they tried to sue every film that's ever ripped off Jaws, eh?
Oh,
Jesus
you'd have
Christ.
to go after Grizzly and
Grizzly.
everything else.
Yeah. Or just the Jaws Mayor alone, you'd be hunting down thousands of films. How many films have done the Jaws Mayor? Well, we're not closing this summer, all that shit. Couple of upgrades. Just on better versions and whatnot. The Shout Factory version of the Quater Mass experiments. The film. I don't like the film very much. There's some great stuff in it. I love most of the performances, but I just fucking hate Brian Dunleavy. I fucking hate Brian Dunleavy. Quater Mass is a brilliant rocket scientist. It is in the TV show, the serial from the 50s. And it's not because they cast an American. I think they did that very well when they did X the Unknown. But Brian Donlevy is a heavy. He's not that kind of actor at all. So he comes in like a drunken, shambolic mess. You would never believe this guy in a million years would build a rocket. It's the most ridiculous casting ever. Just get any American actor. So he kind of ruins the Quater Mass character. Luckily, most of the plot itself is great enough to kind of accommodate for it. I think he came out as the creeping unknown in America because Quater Mass obviously wasn't a thing there. But it's got some wonderful stuff in it, including Jack Warner's performance, written by the great Nigel Neal, who also did The Abominable Snowman, which was a pre-Hammer horror. It came out before Hammer did their first horror, which was the Quatermass Experiment, and this is the first Peter Cushing Hammer movie.
Yep.
So it's great to have from that point of view. It's very tame by our standards. I mean, we dare you to see it alone. You could show this at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday, and nobody would. It's just very old.
Forrest Tucker's great in it, and for the time, I think the Abominable Snowman. Of course, you have to wait till the last 2 minutes of the film to see them, but I think they kind of look okay for the time, and it's
stacked with extras. Val Guest, great director. Wonderful director, overshadowed by Terence Fisher, who most people think of as the Hammer director, but Val Guest every bit as good in his own way. And then funny that Dan mentioned Hitchcock, because I've recently been trying to fill the gaps in the few Hitchcock films that I don't have. So I got Blackmail, which was his first sound film from 1929. Yeah, 29. And this is one of those films that you get two versions. You get a sound version and the silent version, because most cinemas weren't quite ready for sound yet, so they didn't want to lose all that potential profit, so they just made two versions of the film. It's quite fun because you can see the differences, because obviously in the silent film you can do a lot more with the camera. You don't need to worry about the sound getting in the way, and then when it goes to the sound version, they have to film way back, and the actors are very stilted. They're not very good with their voices because they were cast because of their physical presence, obviously, on silent films. So it's even interesting just from a historical point of view, from that kind of Singing in the Rain era can these guys make the transition into the sound era. Another Hitchcock, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, from 1941, never been on Blu-ray. It's one of the few Hitchcocks that's never made its way to Blu-ray. And it's the last film by Carol Lombard before she died in that plane crash, Clark Gable's wife. Very non-Hitchcock film. It's a screwball comedy. It's the only thing he ever did that was really remotely in that genre. It's much more Preston Sturges, but it's still Hitchcock. And it came out after Rebecca, after Foreign Correspondent. So it's weird that he kind of did this one random comedy, but he loved Carol Lombard, so I think that kind of explains it. And Dan literally just mentioned it. Secret Agents from 1935 has indeed never had a Blu-ray. So Young and Innocent has. This has not. It's the other big Hitchcock that's never been upgraded. This has a hell of a cast for a British film made in 1935. It's got John Gielgud. It's got Peter Lorre, looking very Peter Lorre.
Robert Young.
Yeah. And from the book by Somerset Maugham, written by Charles Bennett, Hitchcock's greatest co-writer. So yeah, highly recommended. This is one of the first Alfred Hitchcock films where you could easily say that's Hitchcock. And then to round off the kind of Hitchcock run through, the British International Pictures collection from Kino, which has 4 films. The Ring from 1927. Sadly, it's a boxing film and not Alfred Hitchcock doing a J horror 80 years before it became popular. Champagne from 1928. The Manxman from 29. The Skin Game from 31 is the sound film on here. Historically fascinating. None of these are great films. There's good stuff in them. You can see the evolution of Hitchcock. But this is brilliant. This is just interesting. But it's Alfred Hitchcock. And then try to think of what else I've recently watched. I watched that film that is one of those films. I always watch these when a film comes out and you ask someone and they say it's the best film of the year, and then you ask the next person, say it's the worst film of the year, so it's completely divisive. I don't even know how to say it. Skinkmarink, is that how it's Skinmarink?
Yeah.
That is a hell of a movie. Skinmarink, I'll go with that. It's about kids who's only about 6 or 7, and her little brother, and they get left in the house at night, and it's all shot in very weird angles, tiny budget, literally thousands of dollars, and the doors vanish, all the exits vanish, and the parents vanish, and it's all done from a kid's perspective, and it's all done very fairy tale like, but really twisted and dark, and nothing much happens. It's one of those films where it ends, and I can see exactly why people do hate it, because it's either it's going to scare you or it's not. So if you're not in tune with it, if you want jump scares, if you want CGI, if you want to see things, it's not that kind of film at all. It's a real psychological horror. But if you're in the mood for something that's very unusual, very one of a kind, I think it's really worth a watch. It's only an hour and 20 minutes.
I think that's streaming on Shudder over here.
Yeah,
Could've
yeah, but
sworn
it's
saw
been
it
quite a
for-
big hit.
Let's check that out. I think I saw it advertised on Shudder.
Yeah, it's so apart from that, nothing else really stands out. I mean, the Gene Hackman box set from Imprint, but there's absolutely nothing genre about this whatsoever. So yeah, I'll stop there.
Cool. Jamie.
All right. Dan Brown brought up an actor, and it reminded me, I had stats here for my first round. Real quick, when I was watching these movies, I was like, how many times has Boris Karloff died on screen? He's always dying. So I got out the Google machine, and there's actually a list of the actors who have died the most. Karloff comes in at number 5.
Wow.
42 deaths.
Wow.
Lugosi, number 9 with 36. Do you want to hear the top 5 real quick?
Yeah.
John Hurt at 4 with 43 deaths.
Huh.
Vincent Price at number 3 with 48. Now you can guess number 1 probably, if you think about it.
From Game of Thrones.
Christopher Lee at number 1 with 70 deaths.
70.
But number 2 was shocking. Dennis Hopper with 48 deaths.
Did he even do that many movies? Holy crap.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah.
know. That's crazy.
His career dated back to the mid-50s, so he was,
Wow. Christopher Lee by
Yeah.
far. That's
Bad
crazy.
cowboy films.
Rebel Without a Cause, he was in that in 1953.
Yep. He lived through that one.
Yeah.
And Cool Hand Luke. Yeah.
All right. Well, I streamed a few things. I watched They Cloned Tyrone on Netflix.
Okay.
It's a sci-fi movie with it's Jordan Peele meets Quentin Tarantino, basically. Maybe with a little Spike Lee thrown in. The wife hasn't watched a sci-fi movie with me for 20 years probably. But you know how Netflix starts and the movie starts, they give you a little thing. If you don't touch any controllers, they give you a little snippet of the movie. Well, she saw Jamie Foxx being funny. So she goes, okay, let's watch it. Was not her cup of tea. It's good. Maybe has a couple pacing issues here and there, but it's pretty good and good enough to recommend. It's hilarious at certain parts too. And I watched a couple TV shows. I'm watching. What'd you guys think of Secret Invasion? I thought it was pretty solid. I mean, my expectations are kind of low going into Marvel stuff these days.
Yep.
So I thought it was pretty solid for Marvel 2023. And I know Davey likes it. I've been watching Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Now, this is the quirky Star Trek show. They're doing all kinds of things that are a little bit. The episode before this, they had the anime. It starts off with animation, and you got the Lower Decks crew, the animated show, and they're totally as the Lower Decks animated crew, and they go through a time machine, and they become real, and now they're stuck in the past in Strange New World time as the cartoon characters, but they're real actors, and they need to get back to their cartoon world. And when the Star Trek openings go in, the opening credits, it's all animated. So what I love about this show is the makers are having a ball doing this show. You can just feel the energy, the fun of the writers, directors, and actors coming off the screen, and it's infectious, and you're having a ball too with it. And then they just did a musical episode, and I told Davey, if they're going to get quirky all the time, they're going to run out of ideas, and then they're known as the quirky show. So what are you going to do to keep the quirkiness going when the well goes dry? Well, I'm still in the mindset of 24 episodes in the season and 7 to 8 seasons long. And he reminded me, look, it's probably only going to go 3 years, and they're doing like 9 episodes at the most a year. So they could probably keep this going. But the singing episode, I was like, all right, it's going to be like cop rock, where they just burst into song. They actually make the singing part of the plot. And they're like, why are we singing? We have to stop this. And it's part of the thing that they need to stop. And it's hilarious. I mean, and in the songs, not only did I not mind the songs, I want to hear the songs again.
Yeah.
Release the soundtrack. I'll fucking buy it on vinyl or CD. I mean, a horror song is fucking great.
Such a good singer.
Geez, it's some of these songs are just great. Spock's song was cool. So I totally recommend this series. And I watched a movie on Shudder called Influencer. Now, I don't know what an influencer is. Are we influencers? Is there a difference between a YouTuber and an influencer? Or is it the same thing?
The minute somebody says, I bought that because of you guys, you're an influencer.
So I'm an influencer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So you're influencer.
I didn't know.
For
But
an older
it's
demographic.
directed by a young guy. And I could tell because of 2 reasons.
Influencer freak.
A, he knows what an influencer is. And he makes a movie around it. And B, there's a scene. Have you guys seen this movie?
No, but I've seen the trailer.
I was gonna say I saw it on Shudder when I was clicking through.
Okay. There's a scene where a guy attacks someone coming into a house, and he had a lot of time not to have his backpack on, but he attacks this person with his backpack on. I'm like, does he still have his backpack on? Someone young made this movie, and they see no problem with that. What? You just always wear your backpack, don't you? So, but I really enjoyed it. It's kind of like, I think the message is if we all went away, we're not as important as we think we would. People might go, whatever happened to Sea of Tranquility? And a week later, they get used to not us being here. Everybody would be fine without us. So, yeah. And I also find it interesting that the villain in this movie, Cassandra Nod, she comes on the screen and she has this birthmark under her eye that is humongous, and hair's coming out of it. I'm like, is this makeup? Is she a bird? How did you work this into the thing? And it goes on. And first of all, it takes 26 minutes to get to the opening credits in a 90-minute movie. Found that interesting. And they don't really bring up the birthmark for the longest time. And I Googled her. She really has one. So you got to hand it to this girl. She knew she was born like this, had that birthmark. She told people, I'm going to be an actress. And people probably went, okay, she fucking did it. She's in movies. So good for her. And she gets naked in it.
How does she look naked?
I mean, she's got a banging body. She's a pretty girl. I mean, she's got that hairy birthmark, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, she's kind of pretty from the left.
I'll take that.
I hope she's not watching, or anyone that knows her.
Kind of subscribe to
I
the
said,
school of like, if
great that she became an actress.
if there's something unusual about you, it kind of makes you interesting, and by default,
Of course,
Yeah.
Like a John Waters film is just
And she's awesome in the movie. She's really good in it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and the
I gotta
birthmark
watch it.
kind of gives her the backstory you kind of need for her, what she's doing.
Yeah, the trailer looked interesting. I definitely want to check that out.
New breed of character actors. That's what it is.
Yeah. for sure.
Like Michael Berryman, no, from The Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Made a career out of looking the way he does.
He looked like he was 80 when he's 20.
Right.
Now he's 80.
Now he looks like he's 20 now.
Exactly the same.
All right, cool. All right, Dan.
All right. Well, let's see. For start, I'm going to go down the TV streaming when I'm watching. I don't know if anybody's caught this, but there's a show called Rum. It's on, I can't remember which. It's on one of the streaming networks. It escapes my what it's on. It's written by the writers of Lost.
Okay.
And it's about a small town in which the beginning there's a family in an RV that are driving down a country road. They see a tree that's fallen down. They try to go back around again. They end up back at the tree. They can't leave this area, and they eventually stumble on a small town that looks like it's run down. An old diner, some old farmhouses, this and that. And there's a number of people living there. Harold Perrineau, who was in Lost, played the father of the young black boy in the series. He plays a guy who's the self-made sheriff there. Basically, they cannot leave the town. They can't get out of it. They have no idea how they got there. They know that all the people around them have come from all walks of life around the country. And what happens is they have to get in their houses at night because there are these vampire-type creatures that come out. But the vampires are dressed like 1950s Leave It to Beaver sitcom characters. There's a milkman with the hat. There's like a girl with a prom dress. There's the grandma. And they come up and they'll smile at you, and they want you to invite them into your house. If you invite them in their house like a vampire, they just open up like any number of like the predator mouths, and they just kill people. So just they're surviving this. And then there's some weird shit that happens on. First series was great. I mean, just the whole aspect of these vampires that walk around. I mean, it's like the Cleaver family. And next thing you know, and they're always smiling and looking at you and saying, "Hi, how are you?" And and the new people that come into the town, they find out this isn't real. Maybe we're being set up. And then they start stumbling into weird things like in the show Lost, if you're familiar with it. They didn't go too far down the Lost rabbit hole, but the second season, they've gotten a little bit weird out there with it. The whole suspense and the horrific elements about it, on how they stay and avoid these creatures and all this stuff. And there's this one guy in the town who was stuck there like 40 years ago when he was like 8 years old, and he's still living there. And he's a little bit slow, but he's like a Rain Man. It's an interesting watch. I can't remember the network, but it's on streaming. I think it was Epix or MGM, and I have it in some other package. Worthwhile watch. Okay, next one. Another show that's on Netflix called Midnight Mass, which is about, it's basically you take the elements of Salem and you put it in Jaws town. But this is a small island that's slowly dying. The premise of the story is that the parish priest in the town, who's in his 80s, is summoned, or he goes to Europe on a sabbatical. And while he's in Rome, they've informed that he's had a heart attack. He's in the hospital. So a young priest comes back from Italy, speaks English, comes back to this small community, and then weird shit starts happening. So think of Salem's Lot. I'll tell you no more about that. Interesting premise, gets creepy, moves along, and it's got a very interesting ending. It's kind of like the ending could have a sequel, but I don't think that is the case. But
They never say the word vampire in that whole series.
Yes, right. They don't. That's right. And it's just weird. I liked it. It just had a good pacing. Now we're going to step back to the 80s and got something. Okay. Here's the box. And the box is Loup Garou, La Maldition of the Loup Garou.
Oh, yeah.
That is basically the 1980s Fox TV series Werewolf.
Yeah.
That was
okay.
one of the first horror series to come out.
It's basically the Incredible Hulk.
Yes. And it reeked of the 80s. The first episode is like the teased hair and the guys with the short jackets and it's the bad music. It's cringing. Thank God there's a werewolf around. Please kill these fuckers. Get them out of my sight. But anyhow, the whole series was supposed to come out it was always made as breakthrough because I think it was the first actual original horror series made on Fox Network.
Fox, yep.
And opened the doors for many others years later. But the series, it showed up, I think, on Sci-Fi Network or something like this, and it was supposed to come out a few years ago on Shout Factory or Scream Factory. They were going to put the series out, but the problem occurred that they could not get one band or two bands to sign off on their songs. These bands wanted way too much money for the songs. And then what happened is they found the elements they were using for this film, the audio track was not separated from the master print. So they could not put new music over it. So they felt it was not financially feasible or worthwhile to do it. Now, once again, with the European thing, how can things go on Tubi and how can things go here? In France, they got the rights to put it out. Okay. It is not, it is, if you've seen it floating around on YouTube, which the whole series is on, it has this washed out look to it, but that's the way it was filmed. I remember it that way in the 80s on TV. It's like you open the dark door at the bar and a door in a darkened bar and the light streams in from behind you. Everything is heavily backlit. So it looks like you're in this dreamlike thing. The evening is very soft. It was the way it was filmed. It's a touch better. It's a DVD quality, if you want to call it, as it is DVD. It's of course all the there's a nice book in there, all in French, but you can play the American audio on it, and it's a pricey. It's not expensive. It's $40 for the box, since it's never going to come out legitimately in this country, but it's about $25 to ship it, even through Amazon. So I figured to take the plunge to see what it was all about, and yeah, it's Werewolf. You can find this actually on Amazon US as well, if not Amazon UK or FR France.
I thought that was a pretty good series. I watched every one that was on because I love werewolves, but I remember like a couple episodes in, I'm just kind of like, man, this is just the plots and the pacing. It was just like, Bill Bixby going from town to town and gets into some situation, turns into the Hulk, saves the day, and then he goes somewhere else. And it was the same thing with the werewolf guy, the character.
Well, once also a situation of that film series also is that Chuck Connors was originally the antagonist.
Yep.
And he got into kind of a pissing match or an argument with the studios. He wanted more money. And he literally left the show. So he's kind of slowly, and they kind of got thrown under the bus with that because they were building a whole series, thing based on him with his character. And then it just kind of faded to obscurity. So I thought it was worthwhile. It's region 2. It's not American. So since you have the region free player, it's like, what the hell? I'll give it a shot. Because you'll spend $25 for a bootleg set or $30 for a bootleg set, and the quality is questionable at best nowadays.
Yeah.
Dan, you and Chris have both mentioned Amazon in mainland Europe, and a lot of stuff comes out in Germany and France in particular that doesn't come out in the US, the UK. It's a real interesting. Just put in the name of your favorite actors. And then Blu-ray, and you'll find things you think, Jesus Christ, that's never been out anywhere else. Or extended cuts and things alternate versions.
There was a series that came out on Showtime a couple years ago. It was based on noir films. Okay, it was called Fallen Angels. It came out in the 90s. Tom Hanks was in it. There was a number of the actors of the day were in this series, and they're 1940s themed noir short stories about Los Angeles. Detectives and private eyes and gumshoes. They put out 2 VHS tapes, which was about 6 episodes. And then there was a whole second season with this series. Never came out in the US, but it was released in England under the title of Prime Crime or something like that. And they released the other ones. Now, from France, I was able to buy a box set with all of them on there. But they were released in Europe. Second season was released in England, never released in the US. So you can't figure out what they're going to do.
Yeah,
France is the only country that has Mrs. Columbo on full season. Mrs. Columbo. Kate Mulgrew.
Well, like Chris with the White Shark, it's Germany. You just get Germany has a lot of oddball stuff that comes out. They were the only source for Laurel and Hardy films for many years. They had a huge box set that was.
Do you know what they're called in Germany? I love Laurel and Hardy. Dick and Doof. Yeah, Dick and Doof.
Dick and
Great.
Doof.
You see them on the shelf, Dick and Doof.
Dick und Doof. Now the other thing is, this is not a Monsters Den thing, but a couple of weeks ago there was I've always been skeptical with 4K. I bought a 4K, player because I had bought the George Romero, which I still have not watched yet, Dawn of the Dead. And then I remember buying I had one or two that I had around, and I tried out like Angel Heart, and I was having a mixed emotion about 4K. Like sometimes it looks too scrubbed, it looks too clean, it looks sometimes plasticky or 3D. And so this last Amazon Prime Day, they had the Prime Day, and they had a fair amount of 4Ks for like $9.99. So I figured, okay, let me take a plunge on a few things that I like, see what's going on. And I bought the Blade Runner films. I bought Jaws, which I have not watched yet. I bought Dune, the new Dune. I bought the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy, a few of these. And then I bought two classic films on black and white. And I've always been skeptical about classic films in black and white because you're dealing with much less resolution as far as film is concerned. You can only pull so much out of them. So I was skeptical, but I went out and said, hey, $10, I'm going to buy Casablanca.
Oh, that's great.
I'm going to buy Maltese Falcon. And let me tell you something. I'm totally sold on 4K. I mean, depending on the budget they work with, because I would gather all the houses that do the 4K restoration, okay, you get what you pay for, and Warner Brothers is a big company. So this thing, everybody comes to, you'd think Humphrey Bogart is in your house. Everybody looks like they are alive. They're not even on film. You don't have that depth thing, feeling that 3D look. It blew me away. And so I'm pretty much so, but I'm very selective in what I get on 4K. I'm not getting everything. I grab a few things, like we were talking about the Lucio Fulci, the Gates of Hell one. I bought the Blu-ray version. I don't know if I'm going to get the, and there's a great drinking game associated with that film. And that is, can you check the scenes? If every time you see a scene where Christopher George looks like he's half in the bag, you have to have a drink, because they filmed him on certain days, and some days he's got that little twinkle in his eye, and other days he looks like, oh God, I got to get to the bar. But anyhow, nonetheless, 4K. But the Casablanca, worthwhile. I can't wait to see Jaws. I'm going to buy a few other things. So yeah, but I'm going to be really selective in what I get. So
you're going to like the Jaws one. That's acceptable.
Yeah. I didn't want to ruin Sharkula by watching that. I had to sit there. Oh, and finally, one last thing, okay? $9.96, okay? 5 films, 1 sexy box, okay? You can get Twilight now. Twilight. And just, and I went there, I said, well, $9.96, whatever. I said, does it come with a slip sleeve? The guy goes, what do you expect for $9.96? So Peter, if you want to buy this, there's no slipcase you could throw out. No, I bought this for my stepdaughter. I did not buy this to look at it, but I was tempted to revisit it just to make sure I needed a fair shake.
All right, Craig.
All right, real quick. These are just my action and exploitation ones that I watched recently. A few months ago, Chris and I attended an Italian movie, and one of the movies was Gator Bait with Claudia Jennings. So I watched another one of her movies on Tubi, and that was the Great Texas Dynamite Chase, which was a lot of fun. It was her and another lady friend are robbing banks using dynamite and lighting the fuse and getting the money out before the explosions happen. It was pretty fun. I do like Bobby Joe and the Outlaw better because of the smoking hot Linda Carter, but it was still a lot of fun to watch, and I recommend that one. This one was probably the best out of all these movies that I watched, and we just mentioned her the other day, starring Tiffany Bowling, the Centerfold Girls. Really good murder slasher, almost giallo-ish type movie, and the way that it's done is really kind of cool. It's a serial killer who's going after certain centerfolds, Miss March, Miss June, and so on. The way they break up the movie is there's sort of 3 separate stories, each with the killer stalking a different centerfold model, and obviously 2 are going to be successful and 1 is not successful. But it's a real fun movie to to go along with and see what happens. Lots of lovely ladies in it, and as I said, Tiffany Bowling plays Miss March, I believe. She's in story number 3. They save her for the end to save the day, but a lot of fun. I highly recommend that. That's from 1974, The Centerfold Girls. And last 2 were I have to give these credit to Dan because he had mentioned these some time ago. I've been watching some Cynthia Rothrock movies on Tubi, and they're just a lot of fun. Some good, some bad. So I have one bad one and one good one. The bad one was Lady Dragon. This was from 1990, very similar to Kickboxer, where she goes to take revenge on a villain who had her husband killed on her wedding day, almost like Kill Bill before Kill Bill, but she's defeated and left for dead, and of course brought back to life by a kindly kung fu master who can't talk, who doesn't speak, and has a little grandson along with him to interpret and to help her out. It was all right until you get to the end of the movie where she has a final fight to the death against the bad guy, and then the cops come in and arrest him. So they don't have a final fight to the death. So that was kind of a letdown. But the good one that I did watch is Undefeatable from 1993 with Cynthia Rothrock. Fantastic movie, especially the final fight in that between her and the serial killer who has separation issues with his mom and his girlfriend, and just a completely over the top scene with eye gouges and licking bloody knives and groin punches and everything. So that one was a lot of fun, called Undefeatable. I believe that's from 1993. So
yeah, that villain does have an ending. It's a bit different.
Yeah, and that one's a lot of fun to watch, and there are some fun Cynthia Rothrock movies streaming out there. She's got quite a few, but there are some that are streaming and available to find.
She did some great stuff in Hong Kong. She started Michelle Yao.
Yeah, but check out Undefeatable if you have the chance. It's a lot of fun.
Cool. All right, real quick. Got some 4K stuff here. Craig's favorite movie of all time, Marathon Man.
Mm-hmm.
Dustin
Too disturbing for me. I've never seen it.
Is it safe?
Just you thought it was safe to go back to the dentist.
The dentist, yeah, exactly. Dan was talking about being selective about some 4Ks and which ones look good and which ones are okay. This looks amazing on 4K. Excellent film. Another movie that I really like a lot and realized I only had it on DVD, never bought it on Blu-ray. Well, I said, all right, well, I'll rectify that and get the 4K. Shaun of the Dead. Hadn't seen it in a number of years. Loads of fun.
Oh,
loads of fun. Really, really well done.
right, man.
And last but not least, a pretty solid James Wan film, if you like creepy dolls and puppets and things like that. Dead Silence. One of Davy's favorites right there.
James Wan, you know who he works for. I can't stand that bloody man.
I know. But yeah, there's some good stuff on 4K. So yeah. Anyway, that's all I got.
Reference to the Blob real quick. Chris, do you remember when there was a guy that would come to the Chiller shows and his name was Wes Schenk, keeper of the Blob, and he had the Blob in a glass covered pail, and it was like a small little like dough ball, but it was this red glycerin stuff, right? Yeah, I just wonder because I guess he was. I mean, he may have passed away, but he was the, he'd go around to the shows and they'd have, I think I still have his business
Little Blob, here it is.
The keeper of the Blob can never pass away.
Keeper of the Blob, and I guess he's gone. I guess he would definitely be a center of attraction down there in the theater, down the show.
Yeah, they should have.
What do you do with that in your will? And to my nephew, I leave the Blob.
The Blob,
Why not? It's what every child wants, right?
Yeah, the Blob.
All right, there you have it, everybody. Some of the stuff we've been watching of late. I'll give you a little bit of a tidbit into hopefully what will be next episode. So for those of you who do have Shudder, and we just had Shark Week recently, we did our own little Shark Week here on the Monsters Den recently. There is this very cool documentary called Sharksploitation on Shudder. And we actually know some of the folks who have been involved in that, and we're going to get some members of the documentary director, right, Chris? One of the stars. Michael Gingold, who we've had on the show before. He was involved in that as well. So we're going to hopefully for the next episode have a couple of them join us here on the Monsters Den to talk a little bit about the Sharksploitation documentary and shark movies in general. So hopefully that will be in 2 weeks. If we still have a scheduling conflict, we'll get put something together for you real quick.
And it is a good documentary too. It is
really good.
Don't. So I was totally blown away by it. So.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Put it in perspective.
Who knows? We may get
Sharks
some
for
of the
idiots,
sharks in
but
for
in
an
an
interview.
intelligent way.
Yeah, good timeline for kind of been kind of laid out over
They
the
do with everything.
years. Yeah,
Makes
really
sense. These guys should run the country.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully
A little
that'll
bit
be-
of political satire from Dan there. I
Yes,
love
of course. Come on. we got to keep you people in the real world real. So.
There you go. But thanks for watching, everybody. Let us know what films you've been watching down in the comments below. And if any of these that we've talked about today interest you, go check them out and then come back and let us know what you think down in the comments below. So visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time. For Chris Allo, Davy Gallagher, Jamie Lazlo, Dan Brown, and Craig Kaminski, I am Pete Pardo. We'll see you next time here on The Monsters Den. Take care.